Hello and welcome to Urban Legend Facts. With this week's video, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out something to do that would be special for Halloween. Being as how I have already gone over the history of the holiday with its links to Samhain in the past, I couldn't rightfully touch on that. Then I looked for real hauntings on that day and came up empty-handed, or it was about flesh and blood killers who preyed on people that night. Finally, I realized that what goes hand in hand with Halloween? Scary stories. What are today's versions of scary stories? Urban legends. So today I'm adding my channel's flair to the whole urban legend topic, where I'll tell you the legend followed by a look into the truth behind them, if any is to be found. Just as a heads up, I'll be including one from a movie series, only because I was asked about if there was any truth behind it, and I figured, why not fit it in here? We're going to start with a few older ones and move on to progressively more recent entries. So grab a bowl of popcorn, turn the lights down low, and try not to pay attention to those scratching noises at the door. Babysitter. As the legend goes, a couple by the last name Barrett were planning on going out on a date and hired a babysitter to watch over their two children while they were gone. When the babysitter Sarah arrived at the house, she was told that the children were already in bed and that she wasn't to disturb them. As the night drew on, Sarah was watching TV when the telephone suddenly began to ring. When she picked up, all she heard was dead air before it abruptly hung up. A few minutes later, the phone rang again, and this time she heard a man's voice asking if she had checked on the children yet, before hanging up again. Sarah assumed the call was from the parents of the children checking in, but kept getting interrupted. On the third call, she answered by immediately asking if the caller was the Barretts, to which the caller hung up again. Sarah called the restaurant where the Barretts were dining at, only to be told that they had left 45 minutes prior. Thinking something odd was going on, she called the police to report the strange calls, but was told that since she wasn't being threatened, they couldn't really do anything. The phone rings again, and the same creepy voice asks why she hasn't checked on the children yet, before ending the call. Panicked, Sarah dials 911, and she is told yet again, without a threat, nothing can be done. In tears, she begs the dispatcher to help her, and finally he relents, asking her name and address. He also tells her that she needs to try to keep the mysterious caller on the phone for a couple minutes, so his location can be traced. Sarah turned off all the lights in the house to see if anyone was hanging around outside. The phone rang again, and this time the voice asked her why she turned off all the lights. Sarah asked, "Why, can you see me?" After a brief pause, the voice replies, "Yes." Sarah then says that she is scared and shaking, and wanted to know if that is what the voice wanted. Again, the caller pauses and says, "No." She asks, "Then what do you want?" The voice replies, "To bathe in your blood." Sarah slammed the phone down, but it immediately began ringing again. In terror, she yells, "Leave me alone," only to find the caller on the other side is the 911 dispatcher from earlier. He says, "Sarah, we traced the last call and it is coming from upstairs in your house." He continues, "You need to leave now, and we are sending the police." Sarah rushed to the front door, fumbling with the locks. She heard a door creaking open from upstairs. She turned around to see a shadowy figure step out of the doorway and start making its way downstairs. Sarah finally managed to open the front door, only to be greeted by a police officer with his gun drawn. Now safe, the officer arrested the intruder, and she sees that he is covered in blood, as he has already killed the children upstairs. So do you think this story has any truth to it, or was it simply the figment of a writer's imagination? The problem with this story is that it is ever changing. The names change, the number of children change, and even the entire events change. In some tellings, the children live while the babysitter dies. In others, all of them live, and yet in some, all of them die. In different versions, the intruder is a total mystery, while in other cases, it is the children's brother returning from a psychiatric ward in which he only kills the babysitter. In a particular retelling, the brother is the killer, but the whole family is in on the murder of the babysitter, and her death is a gift to the returning brother. Thinking back to when this story first began making its rounds in the 1960s, it would be greatly unfeasible for people to have two landlines at their house, and even if they did, it would seem unlikely for a trace to tell a person at what room the call was coming from. However, with all that said, this story is rooted on a real event that is still unsolved. In March of 1950, in the town of Columbia, Missouri, a 13-year-old girl by the name of Janet Christman was babysitting one night for the Romack family. Not much is known, but the police received a call from her, and the only thing they could make out was her voice saying, "Come quick." When the Romacks returned home, they sadly found Janet dead in the living room, where she had been beaten, raped, and stabbed multiple times with a mechanical pencil. The one window was smashed out with a garden hose, but authorities assumed the scene had been staged to look like a break-in, and that either the killer was already inside or had been voluntarily let in. A man by the name of Robert Mueller, who was a family friend, was picked up as a suspect after reports came out that he made unwanted advances to Janet previously and had become infatuated with her. It is even said that the mechanical pencil used was the same kind that he always had. Due to a botched investigation, Robert was let free, and to this day the case remains unsolved. Sake Ulna. Our next story is actually very old, but has been making its rounds as something relatively new. According to the tales, a malicious spirit is said to roam about the streets of Japan in the form of a beautiful girl wearing a surgical mask over her mouth. It is said that when she approaches her intended victim, she asks if she looks pretty. If the victim says no, then the ghost will kill the person with a pair of scissors that she keeps in her pocket. If the reply is yes, she will remove the mask, unveiling that her mouth has been cut open from ear to ear. This time she asks, "How about now?" If the person replies no, then the ghost will slice them in half with the scissors. If the person still says yes, then the ghost will slice the victim's mouth to resemble hers. It is said that you cannot escape her by running, as she will just reappear in front of you. According to the legend, you can escape by turning the questions on her, by asking if she thinks you are pretty, or by even giving her so-so answers, like when she asks if she is pretty, you are supposed to say, "You're okay," or "average." These answers are said to confuse her, giving you enough time to escape. In some tellings, throwing candy at her will buy you the time you need, as she enjoys sweets. Not to add humor to this, but apparently if she approaches and you tell her you are too busy or have previous engagements, she will leave you alone out of politeness. As for a bit of backstory, it is said that when she was alive, she was the most beautiful woman in the village. To bolster her ego, she would go around asking the townsfolk if she was pretty, to which they replied yes. Confident in her appeal, she thought she could use her looks to get her out of any trouble that she caused. So she decided to cheat on her samurai husband. When he found out of her deeds, he sliced her mouth with his sword, stating that no one would find her pretty now. Unable to bear this, she took her own life, but returned to avenge her disfigurement. So, do you think this fantastic story has any shred of reality behind it? This story has been floating around since the Edo period, which was between 1603 and 1868. Granted, this story has a few laughable plot points, such as letting you go if you tell her you are too busy, but there is real-life cases involving this. In 1979, sightings of this creature were being spread around, and it was taken seriously enough that school children were allowed to walk home unescorted. Even the police ramped up patrols in an attempt to find the spirit. In South Korea in 2003, a woman wearing a red mask over her mouth was reported to be seen chasing children around. Oddly enough, an old coroner report from the 1970s says a woman who had been chasing children around was killed in a car crash, and when she was examined, they found her mouth had been slit from ear to ear, but not from the accident. Blair Witch. This topic was requested by one of my viewers by the name of Gigor Skorgi, who wanted to know if there was any truth behind the movies. In Blair Township in Maryland, the woods are said to house the spirit of a witch bent on revenge. In life, Ellie Kedward was accused by several children of trapping them in her house and trying to remove their blood. The townsfolk convicted Ellie of being a witch and banished her from the village in the middle of winter in the year of 1785. Ellie was assumed to have died, but suddenly all of her accusers, as well as most of the village's children, started to mysteriously vanish without a trace. In 1824, the town of Burkittsville was built on the old Blair site. More people and children started to disappear, as well as strange effigies were found around the forest. A hermit by the name of Rustin Parr entered the town claiming that he was finally finished. When his cabin was searched, the bodies of 7 children were found in his basement. Rustin didn't deny the acts, but he did state that he did it to appease an old female ghost that appeared to him one night. As time wore on, more and more people entered the forest perimeter without ever returning. Officially, the police said evidence was inconclusive and the case was closed. According to the legends, the Blair Witch is able to change forms, mimic people's voices, and in many cases, able to possess people found in her territory. The most important trait she has is the ability to mess with time and space, which allows her to confuse her victims. I didn't want to go into the whole history of the movies, but I hope this helped as a brief overview. To the original question, is there any truth behind the movies? When the series first came out, it was shrouded in secrecy, and the production company went to great lengths to keep up the ruse that it was real. They even put up missing posters of the actors involved, and to keep the game up required that they be sequestered from society. It got so bad that after everything was found out to be fake, the original actors began getting death threats, and on the opposite side of that, cards wishing the family well on the loss of their child afterwards. If you look into it, the actors' lives were pretty much ruined after the movie was out. As for the truth, I searched pretty hard to find something, but kept coming back to the same point. From the directors, they stated that the whole mythos was completely made up out of their own creative minds. They even went as far as claiming nothing influenced them outside of originally living near the swamps of Florida and imagining seeing stick figures hanging from the trees. Frequently, I've seen this movie's story tied with the alleged real-life encounters of the Blair Witch from Tennessee. While this being was able to shapeshift, appear in different locations at the same time, and afflict its victims, for the most part, it was tied more to one family. There are reports of her still haunting the area, but no one has mysteriously vanished. I believe I covered the Blair Witch in the previous video, but I'll have to check. And if I didn't, I will certainly make a more informative presentation about those events. Momo. Okay, I wasn't going to include this originally, but since it is one of the most recent stories floating around, I couldn't ignore it. According to the legend, the profile of a girl named Momo can be found on a phone app called WhatsApp, where it shows this disfigured image of a creepy girl. Attached to the photo is a couple of numbers that people can call or even chat with Momo, but most are from South America, but a few of the numbers route to Japan. It is said that if you message her around 3 o'clock in the morning, she will reply, normally in Spanish, stating that she knows your personal information. Followed by this, she sends very graphic, disturbing images. Apparently, if you let her reply twice in a row to you, then she will either hunt you down or make you disappear completely. In some cases, this entity will send sound files that are filled with screams or dead air. Other stories state that she will give a person instructions to follow, and if they refuse or fail the tasks, then she will seek revenge. Should you get rid of your phone now? Or is this just the newest viral stunt? This event has been tied to a handful of people ending their lives out of fear of this being real. It came out later that in those situations, a malicious spirit isn't involved, but rather a cruel prank is being pulled on people by others. It got so bad that the Spanish police even made statements on the matter, saying to avoid the whole challenge, as it is being called. As for this frightening image, it is real, but in the sense that it is from an art display at Tokyo's Horror Art Vanilla Gallery. The sculpture was created by an artist by the name of Midori Hayashi, who who worked for the Link Factory, a Japanese special effects company. Hayashi is known for making creepy-looking dolls using animal parts, and this one in particular is called Mother Bird. As I end this, I hope you all enjoyed these urban legends and finding out the truth behind them. It was fascinating learning how many actually had real-life events behind them. I also wanted to wish you all a happy Halloween, a joyous Dia de los Muertes, a great Samhain, or if you don't celebrate any of those, I wish you a great day. If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content to this, and I would also appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone who enjoys this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.